was one of those calm October nights where the air smelled like smoke and fallen leaves. The temperature had dropped just enough to make the porch light halo through the fog. I had a big bowl of candy by the door and one of those orange pumpkin buckets sitting next to it, just for effect. The trick-or-treaters came in waves. Little pirates, witches, superheroes, the usual. Around 8:30, things started to slow down. I figured that would be the end of it for the night, so I set the bowl by the door and turned the TV back on. That's when I heard the first knock. It wasn't a hard knock, more like the sound of small fingers tapping the wood. I opened the door, expecting to see one of the neighborhood kids who'd missed the rush. Sure enough, there was a boy standing there. He couldn't have been older than 7 or 8. He was wearing a costume that looked handmade. A kind of patchwork ghost outfit, white fabric with uneven holes cut for eyes. He held out a small pillowcase and said softly, "Trick or treat." I smiled and dropped a few pieces of candy into his bag. "Nice costume," I said. He didn't respond. He just turned around and walked down the path without saying another word. Something about him was a little odd, not scary, just quiet. Most kids run off or shout thank you, but this one moved slowly, almost too carefully. I figured maybe he was shy or new to the area. I closed the door and went back to the couch. 10 minutes later, there was another knock. When I opened the door, the same kid was standing there again. This time, his costume looked a little different. The sheet wasn't as clean. It had smudges around the bottom, like dirt or something darker. His pillowcase looked fuller, but his face, or where his face should have been, seemed lower, as if he was slouching. "Back again," I said, laughing a little. "You're going to run out of houses if you keep hitting the same one." He just stood there. "Trick or treat." His voice sounded quieter this time. I gave him a couple more pieces and told him to have a good night. When I turned to close the door, I glanced down the street, expecting to see other kids or parents waiting nearby. But the street was empty. Every house had its porch light off now, mine being the only one still glowing. About 15 minutes passed before I heard the knock again. It was softer this time, like the kid wasn't sure if he should be there. I opened the door slower, already feeling uneasy. He was back, but the costume had changed again. The sheet wasn't white anymore. It looked greyish and damp. The pillowcase hung from his hand like it was heavy with water. And the smell, there was this faint, earthy odour, like wet soil or something, that had been underground for a while. I didn't say anything for a moment. I just looked at him, and he looked back, silent. The fabric around the eye holes was darker now, and it almost seemed like there was something behind them. Not eyes, but 2 small shadows moving slowly. "Where are your parents, buddy?" I asked. He tilted his head slightly, like he didn't understand the question. "Trick or treat." His voice had an echo to it now, faint, like he was speaking through a long tunnel. I hesitated, then dropped another handful of candy into his bag. My hand brushed his accidentally, and it was ice cold. Not just cold from the night air, colder than skin should ever feel. He turned around and walked off again. Same pace, same quiet steps. I watched him until he faded into the fog. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach twist. There were no footsteps on the walkway. The ground was damp from the earlier drizzle, and every kid that night had left muddy prints. But this boy, nothing. The dirt looked untouched. I closed the door and locked it this time. I even turned off the porch light, figuring maybe that would tell him I was done for the night. Then I sat back down and tried to focus on the TV, but I couldn't. Every sound from outside, the wind, the creak of a branch, made me tense up. At around 10 o'clock, I heard it again. Not a knock this time, a dragging sound. It started at the end of the porch and moved slowly toward the door. Something soft, heavy, scraping against the wood. Then, a single knock. I froze. My phone was on the counter behind me, but I didn't move to grab it. I don't know why. I just stood there staring at the door. The sound came again. Knock, knock. Then silence. I swallowed and finally stepped closer. My hand was shaking when I turned the lock and cracked the door open. No one was there. I opened it wider, scanning the yard. The fog had thickened, making everything look distorted. Then, near the edge of the walkway, I saw it. The pillowcase. It was lying in the grass, soaking wet, its contents spilled out. But it wasn't candy inside. It was old, muddy coins, rusted buttons, a few pebbles, and one of those cheap plastic skull rings kids wear. As I crouched down, something cold brushed the back of my neck. I spun around. Nothing. Just that empty walkway. I shut the door fast and double-locked it. Every so often, I thought I heard movement on the porch, faint shifting, like fabric brushing wood. Around midnight, my front porch light flickered, even though I'd switched it off earlier. When I looked through the window, the light was glowing dim orange, and standing under it was the boy. He wasn't holding the bag anymore. The costume was hanging loose, soaked completely through, sticking to his shape like second skin. His head tilted upward, as if he was staring right at me through the window. I couldn't move. My chest felt locked up. Then slowly, he raised his hand, the same hand that had knocked before, and pointed toward the candy bowl I'd left by the door. It was empty. When I blinked, he was gone. I don't remember much after that. I must have fallen asleep near dawn because the next thing I remember was the sunlight creeping through the blinds. Everything looked normal again. Quiet, calm. But when I stepped outside, I saw something that still makes me feel sick. At the edge of my porch, right where he'd been standing, the wood was wet, not from rain, but from something darker. And pressed into it were the faint outlines of small, bare feet. That night, I told my neighbor about what happened. He stared at me for a long time before saying, "You know the old Miller boy, the one who drowned in the creek back in the 90s. I nodded slowly. Everyone in town had heard the story. His mom used to make him wear a ghost costume every Halloween. Said he loved trick-or-treating more than anything. He was found still wearing it when they pulled him out." I didn't say anything. I just stood there, staring at my porch, replaying the sound of that soft knock. After that, every Halloween night, I saw him again. Always standing in the same spot on the porch, quiet, patient, waiting for candies. Halloween used to be one of my favorite nights to be on air. Our station, 104.3 FM, The Creek, ran this little haunted request line segment every October 31st. People would call in, share creepy stories, local legends, ghost sightings, whatever they had. It was corny, but fun. We even decorated the booth, fake cobwebs on the mic, a plastic skeleton hanging from the ceiling, and an orange bulb in the corner lamp to set the mood. I'd been doing the late night slot for about 4 years. Most nights, it was quiet, just me, the equipment hum, and the coffee machine groaning in the background. But that Halloween, 2 years ago, was different. The show started off normal. A few prank calls, some high school kids pretending to be possessed, a woman swearing she saw a ghost in her mirror. All pretty standard stuff for the night. Then, around 10:30, we got a call. The phone light blinked once. "All right," I said on air. "You're live on the creek. What spooky story have you got for us tonight?" There was silence. I almost thought the line had dropped, but then I heard breathing. Slow, steady, close to the receiver. "Hello?" I asked, leaning closer to the microphone. More breathing. Then a voice, quiet, almost a whisper. "I like your costume." That caught me off guard. I wasn't even wearing one. I kind of laughed it off. Yeah, good one. I'm actually just in jeans and a hoodie tonight." "What about you?" A pause. Then, grey hoodie, faded jeans, left sleeve pushed up, like you always do. For a second I froze. I looked down at my arm. My left sleeve was rolled up, just how he said. "Okay," I said, chuckling nervously. "Who is this?" "Someone from the station." "You always fiddle with your wedding ring when you get nervous." I stopped moving. My hand was right there on the ring, twisting it without even thinking. I didn't say anything. I just muted the line for a second, cut to music, and stared at the studio window. The reflection showed nothing but the soft orange glow and a tangle of wires on the desk. When I unmuted, the caller was still there. "Don't look behind you," he said. I spun around anyway, just my empty chair, the equipment rack, the coffee cup, and a stack of CDs. Nothing else. "All right," I said, forcing a laugh. "You got me. Good prank, buddy. But I'm gonna have to move on." I reached to end the call and froze again. "If you hang up, you won't have time to say goodbye." The voice wasn't coming from the headset anymore. It was faint, coming from behind me. I turned so fast my chair nearly fell over. No one was there. The red on-air light glowed above the booth window, steady as ever. I grabbed the phone, hung up, and switched to pre-recorded ads. My hands were shaking. I told myself it was a prank. Someone must have seen me through the front window, maybe a listener who recognized the studio layout. We were on the ground floor, and the parking lot lights made it easy to see inside. Still, I got up, walked to the glass, and peered out into the lot. Empty. Not one car but mine. No people, just fog rolling in from the creek behind the building, thick enough to muffle the streetlights. I locked the studio door. After a few minutes, I convinced myself to finish the show. I played another song, checked the mic levels, tried to sound normal. Then the line blinked again. I didn't answer it. It blinked twice, then stopped. When I leaned toward the mic again to speak, I noticed something on the desk that wasn't there before. A small folded note, right beside my coffee cup. The note said, "We used to listen together every Halloween." I stared at the handwriting. The ink was smudged, like from damp fingers. I unfolded it further. At the bottom was a name. Anna, my wife's name. She had died 3 years earlier, Halloween night, in a car crash while driving home from my show. I hadn't spoken about it publicly, not on the air, not online, not even to my co-workers. My throat went dry. I whispered her name before I even realized I was saying it. Then the phone rang again. Not the studio line this time, The landline phone, the old black rotary one on the wall, disconnected years ago. I hadn't heard it ring in all my time there. It just kept ringing, steady and shrill. I picked it up. "Anna." The line crackled. Then the same whispering voice came through. "Turn around." I did. And there, through the glass of the booth window, was a figure. It was faint at first, like someone's reflection, but it wasn't moving when I did. A woman's shape, hair hanging down, one hand pressed to the glass. I froze, unable to breathe. Then the figure stepped closer, her face pale, eyes dark and wide, like she was underwater. "Anna," I whispered again. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. She lifted her hand, and the glass fogged where her palm touched it. Letters began to form in the condensation. Slow, shaky. S-T-A-Y. Then she was gone. Just the reflection of my orange desk lamp in the glass. The phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor. I hit the power switch on the mixer, killed the lights, and left the studio without even grabbing my jacket. When I reached the parking lot, I stopped. The fog had thickened so much I could barely see my car, but I could hear something. Faint, distant. A woman's voice humming through the static of a radio. My own broadcast, still playing from somewhere inside the building. I got in my car and left. I didn't go back for a few days. I quit radio that winter